we've had an unlikely change of governor between the MPC's terms. So there has been a difference in stance between Urjit Patel, the governor, and Shaktikanta Das, the governor. Urjit Patel in the December meeting had noticed softer than expected inflation, but he had also highlighted that core inflation remains high. Taking both those into account, he had said that if inflation risks do not materialize on a durable basis, space for policy action may open up in due course. At no point did he suggest in the December meeting that a rate cut and a change in stance would come as soon as the February meeting. Shaktikanta Das, who's taken the chair from him, has taken a different stance, not to say that he hasn't noted the elevated core inflation, but he's focused on the legal mandate of targeting headline inflation, which into Q3 of next year is expected to be below the 4% midpoint of the MPC's target. Taking that into account, he said that the time is opportune to seize the initiative and create a quote-unquote congenial environment for growth to revive and to ensure this in a sustained manner. So his focus clearly on growth, given that the inflation objective has been met, and he said as much. Deputy Governor Viral Acharya voted against a rate cut, although he voted for a change in stance, and his thinking has been consistent. You have to give him that. In December, he talked about the fact that the recent downward surprises to inflation had significantly reduced the need for policy tightening, but they did not eliminate the requirement altogether. Now, based on the inflation prints that he got since then and the information he would have picked out from the RBI's research department, he said that the MPC's mandate to target headline inflation at 4% is on a durable basis while paying attention to growth. And given the information that he has at his disposal, he prefers to take off the helmet but stay within the crease, using cricket terminology there to explain his vote for a change in stance but a vote for a status quo on rates. Now, the big shift on the MPC came in from Michael Patra, who was actually considered to be the most hawkish member of the MPC. His hawkishness depicted in some of his comments in the December policy, where he, for instance, said that although softer inflation prints could likely lull inflation expectations, abundant caution and decisiveness in quelling risks to the target are warranted. And, you know, if you go back into a few MPCs before that, it was a similar kind of hawkishness that Michael Patra had maintained. This time around, he chose to focus on the headline. He chose to say that under the inflation targeting framework, the intermediate target is the forecast, and that forecast is below 4%, so it gives them some room. And then he went on to say, slightly, inexplicable sort of comment, saying that it's prudent to preserve sufficient policy space to insulate the economy from adverse external shocks and to boost domestic economy in an opportune manner rather than deplete it in haste. I have no idea what he means by deplete it in haste. If you had maintained a 6.5% policy rate, would that have meant that the economy would have, sort of taken another knock? I don't know. But these are the words that he has chosen to use. We are perhaps slightly facetiously calling it the taming of the hawk. But moving on to other committee members, Ravindra Dholakia, of course, has been the most dovish member of the MPC, and he maintained that stance. He'd argued in the December meeting that real rates in the economy are too high. He made that same argument right now and said that there is room to bring down real interest rates. He also argued that real interest rates have a bearing on real GDP growth, and that should not be ignored. Among the non-RBI members on the MPC is also Chetan Ghate. Chetan Ghate was the only person who had voted along with Viral Acharya for a status quo on rates. And again, Chetan Ghate has maintained fairly consistent thinking, where he has focused on the elevated level of ex-food, ex-fuel inflation, that's core inflation. He said that this time around as well, and he said that maintaining status quo on rates would be consistent with sustainable growth in the economy and achieving the inflation target over the medium term. He also flagged off fiscal risks coming in from off-budget spending, which he says is something that you need to watch out for. Pami Dua, the last member on the committee, has always been a very data-driven person, so perhaps you could forgive her a little bit more for changing stance abruptly, if you want to call it that. Until December, she was still talking about the upside risk to inflation and said it was best to pause and wait for incoming data. This time around, the data focus has been more on the growth numbers, not just domestic, but global growth numbers and indicators by ECRI, which suggest that there could be downside to growth coming in light of the benign inflation outlook and the moderating inflation expectations, as well as the likely headwinds from global growth. Pami Dua said that she votes in favor of a a policy repo rate. Those are the individual members. The bigger takeaway is that growth certainly has, once again, gotten primacy in the MPC's language, thinking, whether it's some of the domestic growth concerns that we have seen with softer than expected GDP prints, or it's the global growth concerns that are emerging. It does look like it is now growth until we see some risk to inflation actually show up in the data, upside risk to inflation show up in the data. It does look like growth will maintain its primacy.